Welcome to this week's episode of Safe Room, your weekly source for horror gaming discussions and proudly part of Bloody Disgusting's Bloody FM podcast network. I'm your host, Jay Krieger.
And I'm the other one, Neil Bolt.
And this week we're back with an all-new grab bag. But before we dive into that, we have a slight structural change to the show in that, with this new magazine-style format that we have, we figured that we would take one of our great loves of podcasting, and that is Horror Bytes, and consolidating that into our weekly Monday episodes. So from now on, moving forwards, we will no longer be doing Thursday episodes of Horror Bytes, but you will get two episodes essentially, or two features for the price of one here. We're going to kick off each episode, still going to be released on Mondays, brand new episode of Safe Room, but now you get Horror Bytes at the front, and then you get to round things out with, maybe an anniversary chat here or there, but then right into the grab bag to round out the show and whatnot. This just seems to make more sense, I think, based upon, the bite-sized nature of Horror Bytes. Plus, lives are hectic and busy as, recently has proven.
Yeah, well, I think the internet being stable for 5 minutes would be lovely too.
Yeah, the heat wave that both of our nations are having is certainly not helping things.
No, it is not.
But I think the other aspect of Horror Bytes before we get into our first one is that we might be doing away with the theme. I think it's more going to be just like when you discover something that you think the other one might enjoy, or just something catches your eye, which has always been a facet of Horror Bytes, but the theme aspect that we were doing for a couple of months there just made more sense with the old format. But this week we have 3 Horror Bytes to chat about. And since, you were the original captain of Horror Bytes, I'll let you decide which one we chat about first.
I guess. Let's see, I'm trying to think which one would be best to talk about first. Let's go with Death Spiral first. I think that would be the nice one, which is by Kinda Nice, I think is the name. It's another for the annals of great names on it show, and Grass-Fed Fish, I think, is the other developer on this. So, yeah, 2 on that one, which is described as like a one-button horror roguelike. And when I saw that description of it, I was like, okay, this is already intriguing hook. I hadn't seen anything of what the game was about at that point, because obviously if you go onto the page, the game basically starts running, and that's great. I like that. Nice and no faff. But you basically have a what we call almost Persona-esque sort of hub, and enemies will just pop up, and you'll have this ring in the center of the screen with like quick time event moments, basically. So something, if you've played anything like Dead by Daylight and you're doing like the skill checks and stuff, you'll see it goes round, and you have to sort of tap just at the right time to sort of connect with it and make the skill check successful. And it basically works like that, as like a battle, a turn-based battle. Their thing will come up in whatever color palette it is there, red, green, blue, or whatever, and click on that to basically block, reverse, dodge, whatever you need to do for that. And your moves will come up in white, and as things go, things get faster. The windows in which you can click things get smaller, and you really have to be on top of like seeing stuff. Now, it's a great idea, I think, in terms of like something really snack size, and just making that sort of RPG-esque sort of battle mechanic working in that way. I mean, you can't concentrate on the visuals too much while you're playing, because you really have to pay attention a lot of it. And there are instances where you can kind of see there's some smoothing out needed, I guess, in terms of like you feel it, like it's a bit unfair. Like a moment will pass you literally after your dial has gone past an attack, or their attack thing will come up, and by the time you swing back around again, you barely make it or can't make it at all. But that's a rare thing, to be fair. Most of the time, as long as you're sort of switched on and really into it, it is pretty simple to do, and you get into that rhythm of things. It's like I've just got a long time sort of aversion to quick time events, because I hate like rhythm and timing with those things. It throws me off so bad. But no, I think it's a really cool idea, and just in between rounds, like you get like to go to the shop, and it still employs the same tactic of like you go round and round and like click on things, and when you're done spending your money, you can basically just click to go out again. And yeah, it's really Moorish as well because it's so fast paced, and you feel like you're getting through a lot very quickly. Yeah, it's like when you do fail, you're like, yeah, I'll give it another go, see what I could do, see what's different. It is quite limited, obviously, being quite a small game, but yeah, I think there's some really fun stuff to it.
Yeah, the minimal presentation of the itch page really did not prepare me for this experience that I actually really ended up liking and appreciated the more time that I spent with it, mostly because of how it scales. Because, you do 2 or 3 rounds of fighting these monsters and then you go to the store, and then like the game doesn't really explain a lot, but again, taking that core simplistic mechanic and then applying it and to every facet, whether it's combat or even being in the store, and then you can buy more health, but also you can buy basically level ups for different abilities that you have. And likewise, the enemies that you fight each have their own type of skill that they can use in combat. So like the fly, for instance, which basically looks like the fly from the 60s version of the fly, not the Jeff Goldblum one, but like that special ability is when they get that little bar that you have to hit to block their attack or to dodge their attack, theirs will actually move periodically, which the other ones are stationary. So it kind of applies a little bit of like the monster's theme to their individual skill set, which, when things start to speed up towards the very end of the game, that can make for some really difficult rounds of combat there. And I probably had to do about 3 goes before I got to the very end of this. So I spent more time with this than I thought, because of the fact that like it took a little bit for me just to be like, oh, okay, I have to level up this skill, and then anticipating the skills that they use, because there's a demon cat or something, and periodically their bars that you need to hit to dodge their attack will like disappear basically, and you have to like remember where it was. And so there are like 1 or 2 instances of that where it was really a pain in the ass, but when I really learned to prioritize leveling up the skill set, it didn't end up being as difficult. But still, that doesn't stop that cursor speed from increasing. That gets to be quite chaotic towards the very end of the match.
Yeah, doesn't it just? Yeah, it's as I said, once you class it for a few times, you've basically seen it, which is unless you're terrible and like me, and your response time isn't quite high. But yeah, then it maybe takes a few more minutes. But yeah, like it, from top to tail, it's a really sort of smart and put together idea in terms of keeping it compact, keeping it all feel ticking over really quickly. Like it's just no fat on it at all. Just the lean, mean sort of roguelike. And yeah, like that was a pleasant surprise in that regard.
Yeah, this was one of those horror bites that I would kill for it to be fleshed out a bit more, because I really think that like for as simplistic as it is, they really flesh out some of those mechanics in a way that I think you just need more of it, because what they have there is quite a strong foundation. So
yeah, absolutely. I think there are games out there that have similar mechanics for their fighting, but like obviously, as we said, it's quite reminiscent of skill checks and QTEs. But I think so, maybe not too much around it. Maybe just a little downtime between like missions, maybe. But yeah, and it's one of those where I see what you mean, but at the same time, like in its current form, it makes sense to me that it is like this quick and easy and lean and that. So yeah, it would have to be like the central idea behind like something that's really taking all this into account and keeping it in that sort of tempo, if you will.
Yeah, no, that's the thing with Horror Bytes. It's like sometimes we see promise, but in promise in terms of like expanding it, but then how much of what already works is actually retained when you get just more of it. So yeah, I do see what you mean there though.
Yeah, fair enough. But yeah, that was just one for the horror bites so far. So.
Yeah, let's chat about the next one that you played, because the one that I had played an additional one that you didn't get to, but there's not a terrible amount to say about it. So I figure we'll chat about Rolla, which is a demo for the game that is actively in development from the developer Pantaloon. And the sort of like elevator pitch for this one is basically take the gameplay of Katamari, but instead of this like cute anime figure that picks up random things, you're the monster from the thing. And you're basically picking up all of these different humans that are running around in a city. And so it's basically the player is trying to just, consume as many humans as possible while also causing as much damage as possible to the city and, all the structures and landmarks there within. I think right off the bat, like I love the look of this game and the sort of vibe of this game. It very much has that sort of 80s vibe to it in terms of like this fun synth score, but then also the presentation of the game is that of a news station that's reporting on it. And it's like, it might as well be like a news report of a kaiju, right? And so on screen, though, it's also tracking, your estimated amount of damage you've caused or the amount of humans that you've consumed. And much like with Katamari, when you're picking up more things or running into more humans, your monster is growing in size. And so you're basically rolling around and consuming people, growing. But when you cause even more destruction, naturally, they're going to send the police after you, the army, the military is going to start bombing it. And every time you take damage, your ball basically shrinks. And so it's about maintaining your size, growing your size, while also causing lots and lots of destruction. And there's clearly like a lot of replay ability that's going to be a focus of this one because of the fact that each of the levels is going to have about 10 to 12 like objectives, if you will, almost like Tony Hawk style. It's like, oh, destroy 10 fire trucks, destroy 5 radio towers. And then if you die, all of your progress is saved. So the next time you go back in, you can move on to the next challenge and whatnot. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with this, just kind of rolling around and destroying stuff. It took me just a little bit to like get the grasp on what to go after, because when you start taking damage, your guy shrinks like crazy, and that can very quickly snowball, if you will, out of control. So what did you think about Rolla?
Well, as like a massive Katamari fan, that was straight away like a great hook. Yeah, I know you recommended this, but it was on my radar anyway. It was just good, like because. So yeah, saw the link. I was like, oh yeah, I already played this. Great. So that's good. The demo that is, and yeah, I love the sort of news presentation of it as well. Like into just being like that Godzilla-esque attack on the city thing going on, and like doing the live stream news. It just feels more fun in that way, and it also kind of reminds me of Carrion as well. That game where again you are just constantly eating and growing and stuff like that. So it which is a combination that works wonderfully, I think. So to have that sort of horror of those three things, like the Blob, Katamari, and kaiju movies, I was like, yeah, that's a winning combo. And yeah, I think apart from some technical hiccups, it's already looking quite smart. I want more. I'm always it's not like XCOM where like every XCOM that does come out and there are a lot of them. I'm like, not quite. Don't quite get the same itch. It's like this is there aren't many Katamari likes, if you will. So this being quite close, but in a very different tone, and while still kind of getting the absurdity of it all, it's fun. I do love this being very horror focused and being like that sort of tongue-in-cheek sort of idea, and that soundtrack, man, it's a very synthy one. It's really just as you said, that really helps that 80s vibe, I think, as well. It just feels like that kind of product. It feels like you should be playing it in an arcade. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
So, which is always fantastic. Like, but yeah, so I'm very much looking forward to seeing the whole game, which I do believe is supposed to come out this year. So, be looking forward to tucking into that when we get.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to seeing, the longevity is naturally going to stem from the amount of maps, right? And the amount of cityscapes and whatnot that you'll be able to destroy. I guess my only thing is that there needs to just be a little bit more, I don't know, feedback. I think, or there's just something that I found was that like when you're taking damage, at some points it almost feels like, you get to a certain level of difficulty, you start taking damage, and then it gets heaped on so much that you just basically shrink almost instantly. And so I don't know if that is a side effect of like me not using buildings as cover or not using some of the special abilities as frequently as I should be. But I just found that like towards an end of a level, I was having a lot of difficulty, like ever trying to being able to recover. Basically, I felt like once I hit a certain point, it was all downhill almost instantly.
How did you use control wise? What did you use?
I used a controller. I
used control as well.
Yeah.
I was wondering if that was an issue, but no, it's like again, I don't know if that's because of playing so much Katamari that it just felt a bit more natural. Because to be honest, those controls are just like weird to get used to. It's not too dissimilar, so I can understand why it might be a bit unintuitive, to say the least, because it's that idea is from a different era, and while there are sort of refinements to this, I could see that there's a learning curve there, I think, and it's not immediately obvious. And we've had this problem with demos before, I think, where you kind of feel like, maybe I want to be dropped into the game in a bit of a gentler fashion sort of way, which but I think for this at the same time you kind of need to understand what you're getting into straight from the off. Go, yep, this is the game and this is how it plays, and you may not like it, you may like it, here you'll find out, sort of thing. But it is a tricky sort of setup, but I think some of it will just be down to like fine tuning.
Definitely. And I think also just the amount of time that I'll be spending with the full release is one of those things where even if it doesn't necessarily maybe have like a tutorial or anything like that, I'll get enough practice in the lead up to conquering that first or second level that it probably won't be a problem for very long. But like we said, this will be out later this year, actively in development, supposed to be out by the end of the year. So we'll circle back to this one.
But you had one final one, which is from a stalwart of our Horror Bytes coverage in Mike Klubnika.
Yeah. The latest from Mike Klubnika, and it was in collaboration with Martin Servel and Tamlin Marlov. And this was Hangover Gallery. And it was made in 72 hours for a game jam. And the description is quite simple. It says, a game about throwing individuals down a pit. That's pretty much what it is. However, they obscure who those individuals actually are. So you wake up in this, just basically this room that there's a bed in the middle, and then there's a bunch of doors around the perimeter of it, but then there's these holes in the floor, and you hear a knock at one of the doors. You go over and open it up, and this like screaming weird little goblin baby type monster starts, making all these weird noises and running at you. And then it's not just one, but two, and then five, and then, like up to 15. And the player's only means of defense, not that they damage you or, you can be killed, is you just kick them and you punt them and you try to punt them into the pits. And that's basically the whole game. It is, very simplistic. It took me about, I don't even know, 5 minutes maybe to get through this. But I'm just always so appreciative that Mike is able to retain his aesthetic of, that like dystopian hell, industrial hell aesthetic that he has, where it's always, like black and white, brutalist architecture. There's always something just a little bit off about the architecture or the room that you're in. Granted, case in point here being a bunch of pits in a room. And, you know, it's simplistic, it's short, but at the same time, like it's a goofy novelty. You know, it's got its moments. It left an impression. I'm not going to go back and play it, obviously, but it is the type of thing that is like, yeah, for 5 minutes, he's able to establish a mood. And here, it's a bit more of a humorous one.
So, God bless Mike for getting the baby punting ahead of
Yeah.
Bill.
Yes, exactly. It's a good primer.
Well, that's good to hear. Yeah, like
Yeah.
I think it was just time, really. I did. If I'd known it was that short, I probably would have got around to it. To be fair, like, but yeah, it was almost straight after. So, oh yeah, it's from Mike, so that makes sense. Yeah, that visual style as ever is just like consistent, whilst also sort of having this overall. I don't know, never really feel like it's the same game over and over again. Just good. Like it could really have been an issue at this point, given how many games he's used a similar sort of thing. They just feel like little pockets of the same world where different things are happening, and yeah, it's the perfect mix of being connected.
Yeah, and you know, if you need a laugh, it's good for that. So it's nice to you know, we don't get a lot of horror kind of yeah. We don't get a lot of like horror comedy games. So once in a while it's nice to play something that, even if it's fleeting, it is a nice it was a nice in between game from the other two Horror Bytes that I played this week. So it was well worth it. But that's going to do it for our Horror Bytes for this week. Just a few, but I think at the same time, like just trying to find odd bits and bobs like we always have will continue to be a staple. And at the same time, it'll be nice to get to have Horror Bytes housed into our weekly Monday episodes. But yeah, before we get into our grab bag of what else we've been playing this week, we'll take a quick break. And when we come back, Neil, you can maybe kick things off with a recent horror multiplayer game that you've been playing. But more on that in a moment. And we're back from our break. And Neil, why don't you tell the people all about the Mound, Omen of Cthulhu?
Yeah, this was a game that kind of crept up on me. Like, it's one of those names that sounds like a lot of those sort of Lovecraft style horror game names, and I was like, yeah. And in fact, at one point, I don't know, I still don't know why, but like there was artwork that looked like it was from a completely different game with the same name, but which is probably possible, to be fair. Like, but like tonally, it looked like it was futuristic. This one is very much like the 16th century sort of thing. So kind of thinking like sort of Werner Herzog sort of Fitzgeraldo and that, they're sort of searching for treasures and going places they shouldn't, but with a far more obvious sort of eldritch horror, cosmic horror sort of vibe going on. I mean, initially the first thing I thought of was like Hunt Showdown in terms of like how it's styled, like even the way like going to the boat, the end, beginning and end of missions is like the same sort of font style for the countdown, the short countdowns usually. But this is more of a co-op experience. It is just 4 people at max, and that's fine. And just, the enemies alone are hostile enough that it's perfectly great challenge in that regard. So the basic mission structure is, in any mission you get, is you go onto this jungle area. There's supposedly got like infinite treasures in search of like this place called the Mound, where there is supposed to be like some sort of like super great treasure sort of thing, and like lots of people have tried. So while the sort of myth has gone on about the treasure, not many people have really come back, and fewer still have come back, with their sanity intact, sort of thing. There's like 4 different characters, like, so it's like consistent character set, like Left 4 Dead, that sort of thing. But it kind of plays more on like the manipulation thing. In terms of multiplayer space, the closest I could think of is probably Dead Space 3, in terms of like one player might see something the other doesn't, and could your sort of ideas of what's going on can be messed up. But obviously, just with 4 people, And there's such a wide variety of things that can go wrong. I mean, there are actual, eldritch horrors to fight. But the idea is that this place is just never going to let up. There's always going to be something coming at you. So really, you're supposed to try and keep everything as calm as possible. Like you're just walking around, being careful, sneaking past the low level sort of undead, corpses of people who've been it before. Generally, you're all right. Yeah, like you can. The more sort of ruckus you cause and noise you cause, the more the jungle senses it, and the more that things start to get bad. Also, isolation is bad as well. So the further apart you are from your teammates, the worse things get for you in terms of like how it affects your sanity and what you see, like the hallucination. So like you'll think you'll see an enemy or a teammate or something, and it'll be a hallucination, coupled with like the very real sort of things that can happen. It's always sort of gives you a level of self-doubt because it will make you react to things that maybe aren't happening, that could then of course make things happen because you've loudly reacted or run away from something. And you're never really much faster than anything chasing you, and in many cases not faster at all. So the other part of this is with your teammates is that there is like a spatial sort of voice chat thing, so you can only hear them within earshot, basically.
Right.
Like that. So you wander off, you can kind of hear them at a distance. But so keeping close together is necessary, but with the nature of the missions being, you don't really want to be there that long. You want to be in and out as quick as possible, get the like amount of loot you're supposed to get on your contract, and then get the fuck back to the boat. Now, the game gives you some things that help. Like you have this horse and cart with like a monk on it who can basically revive you and stuff when you're carried there. But he also carries all the supplies, so it's like a walking supply box effectively. That like trails like a white line of where it's gone, so you can kind of find your way back. But even that's not like always trustworthy, and also does contain like a light that kind of keeps you a bit safer, but not like immune or anything. So you'll quickly find that nothing ever goes smoothly. Like things will go wrong. Someone will wander off. You won't see them. They'll come back. It's not them. Like it could be a doppelganger. I mean, even if they don't wander off necessarily, like they could still be here, and a doppelganger can show up, sort of thing. You've got stuff like that. Like what you thought was some shrubbery will turn out to be some sort of hellish beast camouflaged as this thing. And like I said, the deeper you go in, the nastier things get, and the harder it gets to sort of really get in and out with. But as I said, you have to separate at some point because otherwise, you aren't going to get enough stuff. And like you only have like a certain amount of tries to do a contract. Like I think it's 3 for the most. Yeah, and basically, you get admonished if you don't come back with the amount of goods. You are like given a small bunch of items at first, really, to sort of help you, and that's the price of the contract. It's like we'll give you these things, you use them to go get what we want, and then bring it back. So you can also bring back food and other stuff and supplies and weaponry that I think generally carry over and can help. Like the structure of it isn't really to reward you, which is quite interesting, for a multiplayer focused game. Like even like the leveling up is not really like incentivized too much. But from a thematic point of view, I think that's great because the idea is like you are stuck between a rock and a hard place because here's this ship's captain and his lot who are just obsessed with more and more treasure. Give me more of this stuff. Go out and do this job. And if you don't, you're screwed, sort of thing. And because you have nowhere else to go. But you also the other option is going on this cursed jungle land and just having your mind ripped apart and probably your body ripped apart, as you go. It's like quite impressive as an idea. Like I really, when it sings, you can just have some real anecdotes from it in terms of like it's like the stuff that will happen, like I described to you before, like we recorded like last week, and I said You know, the whole doppelganger thing like catches me out nearly every time when you sort of turn around and like count teammates and go, hang on, like that sort of thing. Like because like the doppelganger is like normally like a bunch of worms that sort of form a shape, and then you just start seeing that wormy thing. It's like the thing ever, and it's like
Yeah.
that was cool. Like I love that about it. But yeah, all the other stuff like the communication methods are just smartly done. But the
Yeah.
problem is,
Mm.
friend or foe, whatever, you know, like whether it's strangers or friends on the internet, your big problem is you are kind of relying on others not to piss about and muck things up for you.
Yeah.
And yeah, you being competent yourself would help too, of course. And um, as I said before, I only have like limited hearing, so I have to be
Mm.
doubly sort of attentive to sound and stuff, which is not easy.
Yeah.
And this is like a really dense jungle, like stuff. So, like it's done in Unreal Engine 5, and while that's not always like a great thing, here it does really just make everything bewildering. Well, what
Mm.
is largely quite structured sets of pathways and things, like you can't jump or anything like that. You have to sort of clamber up like distinct pathways, and
Mm.
you can't like really go too far off the beaten track.
Mhm.
But it's enough with the design of it that you can get lost very quickly, especially as like visually there is manipulation in terms of the environment and all the time, and the time of day you go can change a lot of things as well.
Mm.
I mean,
Okay.
nighttime looks quite light, which is nice, but it is noticeably darker than the daytime, and the way the lighting hits in Unreal 5 kind of works so well for this game.
Mm.
I suppose the main problem with it is that it's a gimmick at heart, because you will see enough of what it does, like in terms of these little things that the game does, and really the variety comes in. What will your teammates do this time? What will happen this time on your missions, sort of thing,
Mhm.
which you keep going long enough. And this game being, I think, like 25 quid ish, so at launch, it's it's got more than enough value for that. And as much as I don't like to stick monetary value in there, I just think when you're thinking of multiplayer experiences that are this singular, and in this
Right.
case should be, because the vision that they have is really well implemented. I think you do want to sort of go, yeah, reasonable price, worth a punt, and it really is. I mean, I had so much fun with it. Like, and it is truly unsettling at times, like
Mm.
especially with the whispering noises and the little not being able to trust your ears or your eyes, like at all, like no matter how many times you do it. And there's just sometimes stuff that is probably just a glitch that feels like it's not, because of the way the game is structured.
Sure.
Like you'll think, hang on, was that supposed to happen? Isn't that supposed to happen? And it's those moments of uncertainty that you often just get like knocked back or whatever, by attacked by something. Um, it's kind of cool as well when you do get like succumb, and you're like miles away, and like you basically can preview your body being like puppeteered like back to where everyone else is, and just seeing what happens, which is like
Oh,
a
cool.
nice touch. Yeah, like
Mm.
so you're not out of the game at that point in that sense. And I think you can be revived as well as with that, if the
Mm.
right connotations. And there's like crucifixes that you can kind of use against teammates that have turned and stuff, to sort of keep them back. And yeah, like it's, and plus like that setting, and that idea of like the weaponry being quite archaic as well, and like depending on what ones you pick up, they can misfire or
Mm.
not go quite right, and yeah, like that. The combat can be a bit iffy as a result, like because some weaponry is just like useless, really, unless you're going to sneak up on things, and sneaking up on things does often go out the window pretty quickly. But yeah,
Mhm.
like anyway, really good fun. I think as a multiplayer horror experience, it's doing a lot, and yeah, it's worth experiencing. It really is. I think just even if it is for like 5 to 10 hours, you'll get
Mm.
plenty out of it and remember plenty out of it. And they could add so much to the game in time, so it could yet grow in the way that games like Hunt grew. But
Sure.
I just don't know where they would go to sort of
Mm.
without changing too much about what makes this game tick.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to play it yet, but in terms of you saying like 5 or 10 hours of enjoyment out of it for multiplayer game, some people, typically say like, oh, well, is that worth the price of admission? But like, I think at this point for me, I would much rather play something like this that, I might not spend tens of hours with it, but I would rather have 5 to 10 hours of experiences that are highlighting the core strengths of the game to the things that you've been saying, the whole doppelganger aspect, or dealing with, utilizing that proximity chat that is at the core of this cooperative experience. So like, I would rather play something like this that has the potential, but even if it doesn't end up being this like game that I'm going to be playing at the end of the year, it still sounds like there's the potential for some like very memorable moments that you're not going to find elsewhere.
Yeah.
I, I guess I'm curious, like in terms of the Mound being co-op focused, you had mentioned that the leveling up is not incentivizing the individual. Would you say that the incentive there is that it makes you a stronger team player in some way? Like, does the game do something that really encourages and cultivates that emphasis on teamwork, other than the notion of you could be infiltrated by a doppelganger or something to that effect?
Yeah, because while you can play this game solo,
Mhm.
because of the nature of it and the sanity impact, you need teammates, you need
Yeah.
each other to survive, especially as you go deeper, because you just will not. If anyone's selfish, they will be done for. And again, that's a fascinating dynamic of this game, is that it doesn't really play on those very obvious sort of human aspects of like cowardice and greed
Mm.
and distrust. Like with what the game's doing, it's really feeding into that and making these things happen, even if you want to be committed and communicate well. Like I said, sure, you could go and do a Discord chat off it and like break the rules of that, whatever, and but really just be denying yourself. You really would. You would not get the full experience and the whole point of why this game works so well when it's in that initial like 10-hour run.
Mm.
Yeah, that whole dynamic with other people is great, because it feels like a betrayal when things do go wrong, even when it's like not their fault, whether if they get turned or whatever. And yeah, it's unique in that regard. And I have seen some reviews sort of say, it's kind of reminds me of Left 4 Dead in terms of like the interplayer dynamic and being like a character. Probably not so much a character in this one, but just like feeling like you're a group who are all as fucked as each other to have to come to this island, the jungly type area, and like do this job, because it's
Mhm.
very clear that to them and to you that this is just not worth it. It's like, but what's the alternative sort of thing? But yeah, you also their motivation is if they can find the mound, they'll share in these infinite riches, because they're infinite. Like, and but obviously no one's lived to tell the tale, so like at the same time, it's like you don't know that. And for us, the player, the motivation is more about like the experience, like, which is, so that's kind of where your incentives lie. I think in
Mm.
terms of like working together, is that without it, the game is not very fun. Like
Sure.
for anyone. Like, and I think it's niche enough that you'll get the right people generally who understand what they're doing. The
Mm.
way that you do it with many games that kind of find their groove in those spaces. Hunt has been very similar like that in the past. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it will definitely benefit from that system. Again, I just hope they don't end up going down the line and going, oh, well, we want to make it more accessible to players. I don't think they will. I think
Mm.
they've gone in with this really bold idea at a really solid price, and they'll probably do modestly out of that, which is enough for any multiplayer game like this. You're not chasing mega numbers, you're chasing healthy numbers that will tide
Mm.
you over. And so yeah, they can see what works and doesn't work and then build on that.
Nice. Well, yeah, hopefully before the end of the year I'll be able to report back on my time with this one, because like you said, I think the hook there, and you mentioning also to me before we were recording, like comparing it to elements of a Hunt Showdown, a game that, when I initially played it around its release, I bounced off of it almost immediately. And then, over the course of the various years of getting content updates and whatnot, and like people like Aaron becoming such staunch supporters of that game and like sharing and exposing us to like the true sort of like magic of that game that wasn't maybe you could only see like the inklings of it initially on launch, but it's really kind of flourished into this super refined hardcore type of experience that has cultivated an audience and gotten its second, if not like third wind post release. But
Yeah.
can
I would
only
also,
can only hope for the best for this one.
yeah, and I'd also say like you should also check out Harrison Abbott's review of Bloody Disgusting as well, because he's played it as well. Okay, he's got some great words on that one. So if you want to learn more out there, then do go check that out.
Perfect. Yeah, maybe I'll link that under the episode for socials and stuff so people can find that and everything. But yeah, I think that's gonna leave it for the only other thing that I played this week, other than the Horror Bytes stuff, and that would be a game that I never thought that I would be playing, just because I'm not the biggest fan of sports. But this is Midnight Hoops from developer NetShrub. This is, I believe, their debut game. This is
Seems to be.
a game that I think was on itch, and now it's on Steam. And this one is exactly what it sounds like. It is a horror-themed basketball game. I think that this is a game that really scales nicely in terms of initially presenting as, the type of thing that we would have found on itch and covered for Horror Bytes, but it is able to take its mechanics and introduce them and give the player ample time to maybe not master them, but become familiar with them, and then increasingly include new facets of challenge to that core mechanic and having a almost survival horror element to it. And so you begin in, as many of these types of games do, you begin in a suburban city. It's at night, there's nobody around, and basketball is your life to the degree that like your loved ones are decrying. It's all you're doing with your free time, but you'll be damned if you aren't going to be committed to the thing that you love. And so there's a like physics-based mechanic to this, where you pick up the basketball and then you hold down the mouse, and then you have to angle it so that way you can arc it into the hoop. But also you need to be able to do jump shots, which jumping in place and shooting, doing layups, running up to the backboard and then releasing at the last minute, getting it off the backboard in the net, and then of course slam dunks, which you basically do a full charge on the ball and then look up and just jump at the net, and then it's the act of like actually slamming it down. And so this game says that it's about an hour long. I spent almost 2 hours with it, just because I spent so much time on the basketball court at the very beginning, just to kind of like master the mechanic as much as I could, get a feel for it. And you even have a phone that you can pull out, that you can scroll not only through messages, which are going to facilitate like the narrative of this game, but also notes on how all of these mechanics work and whatnot. And then it begins very much like a normal Horror Byte does, in that these small little scares begin to happen. Like I'm at the park shooting by myself late at night. I take a sip of water, and the water bottle like very smartly obscures 90% of your vision. And then when you put it down, a basketball comes rolling out of the woods towards you. Your player then begins to maybe hallucinate some things. And then all of a sudden you have some creepy neighbor that stops by. But it's less about those types of moments that are familiar, and more about how they're able to take that basketball mechanic and apply that horror element to it. So the first major milestone of this game, outside of just practicing on the court free of any kind of interferences, you end up in this like else world where all of a sudden you've got 8 basketball hoops that rise out of the ground at various heights. And then these like undead zombies basically come out of the ground, and they're crawling, and you just have to avoid them. Because if you step on them, then you go back to square one and you have to start over. So they've introduced this basketball mechanic, and then they've introduced the true challenge of, you thought it was difficult to shoot the ball into the hoop. Now you have to contend with these zombies. Some of them crawl, and then some of them will actually like walk briskly in your direction. And so you have abilities like you can cross them up, dribble in the ball between both hands, or you can sidestep them. And so it's really about kind of taking these mechanics familiarizing yourself with them, but now you've got this added layer of challenge, and it is quite challenging. It took me a little while to actually like get used to it, and to really like figure that out. And then you end up in what is like the true challenge of the game, which is you go from that first kind of training area to a basketball court where there is, you know, an 8-foot guard that will actually run at you and guard you when you're holding the ball. So now you're on a court and you're dealing with this creature that will run at you. And every time you go to shoot, he will quite literally jump up in the air and extend all of his limbs. And you have to, you know, contend with his block reach, but also if he runs into you and you have the ball, then again, you have to start over. And you essentially get into this like match with this guard where on screen it'll pop up like a series of things that you have to do. And I think you go about 10 rounds. So first is, well, it's randomized every time, but like for instance, you could spawn into this environment and then it says hit a 3-point shot. You hit a 3-point shot. It says hit a 2-point shot. Hit a 2-point shot. And then those other crawling zombies will rise out of the ground and they begin to grow in numbers with each subsequent round that you get through, as does the various types of scoring options that you have to do. So a dunk to a 3-pointer to a layup and so forth until, you know, you beat that guard. But that is such a great use of, you know, AI. And as I keep saying, like the scaling of the challenge, because you know, just when you think that, oh, well, I've mastered this, so like this can't be that difficult, they introduce a layer of difficulty in terms of the AI, especially that guard, that really just kind of like, not that it rivals what it's actually like to play in a game of basketball, but there is a layer of tension there that might not be like scare based, but it is definitely from an athleticism and a competitor standpoint that is like a brief feeling of like what it is to actually play sports. And I just found that to be, I mean, overall, it's just such a strong experience for somebody's first game. Not only like the tightness of the mechanics, but also the ways in which they're able to take that very simplistic concept of playing basketball and actually making it, you know, utilizing horror to make it challenging in a way that I've never seen before. You know, we've seen some sport horror games, but I've never seen anything to this degree.
Yeah, I mean, like to combine something narratively and like mechanically like that,
Mm.
like to really, I mean, you have to, I think, for a story where you're selling the idea that this is your life and you know your commitment is practice, practice, practice. That you have to have a mechanic that feels like that,
Mm.
like you have to put the work in, and you have to, you know, thematically as well. It just sounds like that's part of it. I mean, it sounds accomplished enough that you know the developer had to like implement a mode that is just the basketball, like for players that wanted it. So yeah, that shows you, you know, how good that
Mhm.
is. If that's the case.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's fantastic to hear as well. That something so simple can be utilized like that, and yeah, it's a really good way to use sports as well. Like the idea of like something competitive that, especially, is quite like, you know, as much as a team sport. You know, it's individual ability is such a big factor. So yeah, coming up against those obstacles in monster form effectively, and yeah, that's a really smart idea. And I'm glad to hear the mechanics of it are so in depth, which probably don't help the way I play sports normally. So which is like very much like battering around right through sort of style. So, so not really a basketball player in that regard. But yeah, like I do appreciate like the nuances of sport when they're done well in games outside of like the your annual sort of sports games. It was like sorry, not horror, but the developers of that sort of kung fu action game Sifu did a game called Rematch, which is basically just a soccer slash football game where you can, it basically takes the same ideas of like every like time you go one on one with someone, it's that kind of combo based battle in terms of how what buttons you press when, sort of like the reflexes and movements, and it reshapes the idea and it makes it feel like an individual performance and sport.
Mhm.
Like I like that sort of realigning of it, like not just, oh, here you control the whole team. like, or
Right.
you control like a daft version of what actually happens in a game. Yeah, going down to like everything you can do as an individual to help yourself, help the team. That's a great concept in video game sports, and to do it with a horror game as well, like to the point where people want the sports side of it alone is really strong. So yeah, grand stuff.
Yeah, and I think the last thing I'll say about it is that that notion that you've been talking about you just being the solo man in this, is that, you know, you don't have teammates to hide behind, which might, you know, obscure some of the horror aspect of it. So really, like, it's adding that extra layer of pressure and tension onto the player because of the fact that, you know, it's all on your shoulders, so to speak, which is just, again, like thematically really great. And as we've been saying, it's like this really terrific blending of, you know, horror theme and thematics with a sports game, because, you know, down to the point of like, it could just be as simple as, oh, the basketball has eyeballs on it, which is the case in one instance, but like there really is, and it's not the most, like, the story is there because it provides like guardrails essentially for what's happening. But I do find that like the game is utilizing horror in the correct way, in that it's like, okay, yeah, you get to visualize a bit of the torment that this person is putting themselves through with this obsession of basketball, and how there are these heavy stakes that they have to, you know, perform at their top level. And like, it's just a really smart merger of things and blending of these things together that, again, for a first game is incredible in my opinion. So really, really tremendous game that, thanks to that, you know, practice mode, and there's also a time trial challenge. This is one that I'll probably return to before the end of the year when we start to chat about games that we remember and really stuck with us, because, yeah, I haven't played anything like this before, and I don't know that I will anytime soon.
Well, that's a healthy lot of games I think we've had this week. That's lots of variety, especially, which is like quite remarkable. Like, I mean, only one game about Lovecraft, so that's.
Well, variety is the horror of life, as they say. I think that's one of those things that we really just love about, you know,
Yes,
whether it's
the unending horror.
Yeah, exactly. Just getting to like try so many different subgenres of horror. And I mean, never in a when we started this podcast, there's no way I ever would have thought that one of my favorite games of the year was a basketball horror game. I'm always been dog shit at basketball, don't care about basketball. And yet, I think stuff like Midnight Hoops from Net Shrub just shows like the potential for, you know, giving anything and everything a shot, even if you don't think that it's going to be your cup of tea, if you will. But yeah, over here it's only $3 and 50 cents. So well worth checking out for that price. And yeah, but you know, very much looking forward next week to not only seeing what you've been playing for the grab bag, but we get to have a whole new crop of Horror Byte picks, because as we said in the intro, Horror Bytes now will be consolidated into our weekly Monday episodes, which are not changing. Those will still be released on Mondays, but just no Horror Bytes on Thursday. So 2 for the price of 1 moving forwards.
That's it. And won't always be free. Sometimes it'll be 2, maybe it'll be 1. Depends on what we got. Sure. And yeah, and obviously what the rest of the episode is about, of course.
Yeah. We like to have flexibility here.
Yes, it helps. In our advanced stage.
Yeah. Well, that's going to do it for the stuff that we've been playing this week. But as always, my friend, it's a pleasure chatting horror with you. For Safe Room.
Back at you, my man. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to this week's main feed episode of Safe Room. If you've enjoyed our horrifying discussions, please take a moment to rate and review the show on your preferred podcast platform, as this helps us immensely in ensuring that the show continues to grow. For any and all show updates and additional content, you can follow Safe Room on all of our socials, which are linked in the episode notes, at SafeRoomPod. And finally, you can send any and all emails to saferoompod@gmail.com. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you guys next time.